Hello everybody, Dr. Sam here, and today we're going to be talking about tantrums and meltdowns on this webinar. If you are a parent, I'm sure you've experienced these on a grand scale. We're not just going to be talking about toddlers here. This is going to range from toddlers to teens. And what are we seeing? What's going on? Why? And we're going to be talking about some external factors and some internal factors. And so what I mean by external factors is that's going to be dealing with like behavior. This is all kind of like coming down to behavior. Why are they doing these things? What are some things that, might be able to be, influenced to help with these behaviors and avoiding these meltdowns and tantrums? This is some of the information. I talked to a behavior therapist here in town, and these are the things that they talked about and that were brought to their attention, and how they work at it from their angle, from the outside, outside influencing in, so influencing their behavior. I will be talking as a chiropractor from the inside out. What's going on the inside that's causing these tantrums and these meltdowns? And so between the two, and kind of doing a collaborative effort there, you will find how both the external and internal kind of merge together and what's going on there. A lot of times these young kiddos, these behaviors start creeping in really early. They go from a phase of they're waited on and catered to as a little baby, because we all love little peanuts and stuff like that. And so they're catered to. And then you throw in the wrench of, now we're starting to discipline? What in the world? I don't get it. That's kind of a whole new ball game for them. And then if you have multiple kids, you've experienced this too. Once one of them has a tantrum, it affects all of them. One kid's crying because the other one's crying, and the one over here is crying because he doesn't even know why child A is crying, and so then they're all crying, screaming, and it just becomes this horrible rippling effect. And give me a hands up, yes, if that has been you, because it just almost feeds off of each other. So then once one freaks, the next one freaks, and now you're freaking, and then we're all freaking out together. So that's just one of those effects that comes into play with these. We're gonna learn how we can avoid these. Many families, you guys are not alone in this. You see it all the time. It's the second you start to feel bad, oh my gosh, here we go again, I can't handle this. There's so many multiple families going on with this. Parents are stressed from it. They're completely overwhelmed. Kids are going to feed off of that. They sense whenever mom and dad are stressed and overwhelmed. And then they have their little stressors too that we'll kind of be getting into today. But then it just becomes this horrible storm and this horrible, cause and effect. And like I say, whenever we talk about, tantrums and meltdowns, you might be a parent right now and you're sitting there going, we can't even go to the movie. We can't go to the grocery store. I have fear for going anywhere because little child, Johnny, Sally, whatever their beautiful little names are, they're gonna have a tantrum or they might have a meltdown. And it's so embarrassing and it's so exhausting that we just aren't even gonna go. That is no way to live, you guys. And like I say, I'm here to help. I'm here to kind of help you look at things through maybe a new set of lenses. So then if you've tried, and if you feel like you have tried almost everything, I'm gonna have you look at it something just a little bit differently whenever it's dealing with these kiddos. And so you're doing the best that you can right now with the information that you have. And so give yourself a big pat on the back, give yourself a high five, turn to your spouse and go, hey, we're doing the absolute best that we can. Let's learn something here tonight and let's see if we can do things a little bit differently. We get it. We know, we understand. I see a bunch of kids in my office and I've seen my fair share of tantrums. Don't even think that for a second you're oh my gosh, we can't let this lady also know what we're like. No, I get it. I'm here for you. It's tough. Don't give up. And let's start diving into this, okay? So a question I want to ask, and I want you to kind of put into your mind, and it's kind of this awesome, awesome question to ask. If you were handed a magic wand and I said, what is the one thing that you could wave over your family or your kiddo, what would it be, and what would you want to eradicate from that? What would you want to get rid of? What would be the number one thing when it comes to tantrums and meltdowns that you can get rid of? I have a lot that say the whining. I can't take the whining. The screaming, the crying. What is your thing? The down on the floor, kicking and screaming. They do that. Yeah, they do. But if you had that magic wand, what would be that one thing? And just sit there and think about it for a second. because we can get there. We can get there. Giving you a little hope tonight. So we're going to be talking first about the external factors that are going in and like how we can influence these tantrums and like why they're acting out the way they are. Working with like a behavior specialist is one of those ways that you can kind of find some different avenues to look at these tantrums and meltdowns, and they will give you like this awesome way of how a situation arises with a tantrum or meltdown, or how can we avoid it completely. Picking up on those signs of like what your kiddo is feeding you so you can feed off of them in a positive reinforcement pattern. Whenever I talked to this behavior therapist here in town, they talked about like there's always a why. And there's usually 4 reasons as to why something's going on. The what we know about. The what is they are crying. What are you in for? Well, they cry, they scream, they whine, they complain, all of this stuff in their tantrums and meltdowns, but why is it going on? And from a behaviorist standpoint, the first reason is going to be escape or avoidance. They are going to have this outward expression that is a tantrum or a meltdown because they are wanting to avoid and they're wanting to escape a certain situation that they don't want to be in. Okay, so there's number 1. You can probably start to pinpoint which kids of yours do that and which ones don't. And you're probably, if you have multiple kids, you're gonna be able to place each one into one of these criteria here. The next one's going to be gaining access or being denied access. They want to know if they can get away with it. They want to know if they can go do it. And if they are denied the access, the reaction that they're going to have. So they're constantly kind of pushing that button as well. And another reason why they have these tantrums as meltdowns is obviously, this is probably number 1, is attention seeking. They see mom or dad on the phone, or mom and dad having a conversation with their spouse or with a friend, and they're up in your face. Like, oh my gosh, they're just in there and like, you're on the phone even, and you're having a good conversation, and they are constantly interrupting, like literally like, God bless you, my little niece, Sophia, but she'll even like grab my sister's face and like put it in hers, like while she's on the phone. It's like, they're just attention seeking. They're reaching out for that and they're like, give me all that attention, I need this. And if they don't get it, we all know what happens. And then the last thing that this behaviorist told me about was they honestly don't know why kids are having these tantrums and meltdowns. They don't know. They can't know what's going on the inside of these kids. They're looking at all the external factors and how to change the environment that this child is within. To look into the internal side and to know what's going on with like their central nervous system, their nervous system. A behaviorist and like those therapy and the counseling, they don't know. They can't dive into that because they don't have those tools and that, possibly even that, the resources to do that. As a chiropractor, that's where the good news is. We do. We can look into the inside of what's going on with your kiddo and how your kid's nervous system is functioning. How exciting is that? We're going to be able to tell if it's like overstimulated, understimulated. We're going to get into most of them. 99.9% are not understimulated. I'll tell you that, especially this day and age. And so many parents have been like, oh my gosh, we have tried everything, and like the chiropractic and the nervous system realm, like they just maybe not have thought about. And that's what I'm so excited to bring to you guys tonight. And like I say, look through this through a little bit of a different lens and how it might just enlighten you and almost be that missing link that you've been looking for. And even if you have tried the therapies, the counseling, the medications, diet changes, all of those things, and you've seen improvement, which is fantastic. That's why this is a collaborative effort. But you must feel like you've hit a wall, or you've hit like the ceiling, and like you want to see more of these changes, and you're just noticing that your kiddo just isn't quite where you want them to be yet. And that's where I would hope that chiropractic could come in for you and your family and your kiddo, so it can make your life better. If we can get rid of, help these kids adapt to these stresses and, be able to balance so they aren't able to have so they aren't having these meltdowns and tantrums. How awesome would it be then to like not worry about having to go to a public space and worry about if your kid's going to have a blowout, and freak out and all that. So, the internal side. So the external, we talked about behavior. The internal, we're going to be wondering, talking about, what's going on the inside. And what we want you just to walk away with is just a different set of knowledge here. Looking at the nervous system, looking at how stress impacts their nervous system and why maybe they are having these tantrums and these meltdowns. So as a chiropractor, behavior and diet and therapies and stuff like that, they are so needed. Even medications. I'm not against medications at all. If it helps bridge the gap to get your kiddo there, or even if your kiddo's on medications now, it's okay. Hopefully, like with helping them change their nervous system and how it's functioning, we can maybe even wean them off with the help of like your general practitioner or your pediatrician. Like, I just want people to know like there might be more of a natural approach, because one thing that does break my heart is I hear of parents that have to put, like, their kid has these tantrums and these meltdowns and they're overactive and they might have ADHD and they're just these go, go, go kids, and they get them, like, they might not be having these tantrums and meltdowns all the time though. And they say, and like I've had clients I've dealt with on these issues, and then they say, but he or she is so sweet and wonderful and perfect. Like, I wouldn't change anything about my child in between these tantrums other than we have them. And then they get put on a medication, and then they get put on a medication that now the tantrums and the meltdowns go away, but they're like, my kid almost is like a zombie and it's not who they were before. So that in between the tantrums now and the meltdowns, when, you know, the kiddo used to be this wonderful, sweet, loving, that they love this little kiddo, they look at this child now and it's almost just like it's this blank slate. And that, when I hear that, and parents, it breaks my heart. Like, you love your children so much and they have their silly little quirks and their superhero powers that they are, and to see that be taken away from them from a medication, it breaks my heart, and it doesn't have to be that way. So let's just start talking about that right now. So the thing I talk about in my office 90% of the time is stress. Stress is the root cause, and I think even the World Health Organization, they have declared stress as the #1 cause for illness, disease, and issues with them, like everything on the inside of us. I talk about stress every day, all day, and just how it impacts us and how the nervous system is impacted by stress. Our nervous system, just to touch on this, our nervous system controls and coordinates every function in our body. So as you know that right now, think of how stress might be impacting your kiddo as we start to talk about all these things. And you might be thinking, once again, stress, kids stress, what are you talking about? They aren't having to worry about, you know, everyday life things that adults do, from putting food on the table to paying rent to, you know, keeping a job to keeping the family together and all of that. No, kids aren't having to deal with that, but kids are also living in a totally different world that is producing and going and adapting and changing way faster than even our human brains can keep up with. And so, like, the kids these days are just so much more stressed than they've ever been. They're overwhelmed. They're sicker than they've ever been as well because of all of this stress. And it's like, and of all the, you know, food advances that we have, in which food, you know, we'll get to that. That might be another topic for another day. But today I don't necessarily want to talk about those stresses. We'll get into a couple of like what some of them are on the science level once we get there. But, excuse me, what I do want to talk about today is how stress and how it impacts and what it's doing to your children's brain and their body. That's what I want to get to today. Stress, we all know it's there. We all have it. But we also want to then talk about how stress is influencing the way that your child perceives their environment. If they're able to adapt to the stresses, they're going to perceive their environments not as threats. They're going to be able to adapt to those stresses, keep it calm, keep their inside, their nervous system nice and calm. So then there's actually no need for a tantrum or for a meltdown or for like a backlash or anything like that. Because what I just said about stress being a threat, stress causes things, all of these little stressors, to feel like they're a constant threat. And it's like, if you think about like a snowball, and it's at the top of a mountain, and you just have this little itty bitty snowball, and you set it down and let it roll down the mountain, by the end of it, you're gonna have this huge boulder of a snowball. And all of those stresses, once you have one and you don't adapt to it properly, then you have 2, then you have 10, then you have 20, then you have 30, and it just snowballs and snowballs. Your nervous system eventually just goes, I can't do it anymore, stop, and we're done here. So with kids, they get triggered sooner because as adults, we actually have the ability to maybe learn how to adapt to those stressors just a little bit better, and our threshold's a little bit lower. Kids don't have such high of a threshold. They have a lower threshold that's going to get triggered quicker, faster, and more, I shouldn't use the word violent, but more like outrageous, you know? So So, you know, we've heard of these kids, and you can even think right now, if you've had one, they can go from like, and like when I say these like kids get triggered quicker, you could have a kid that's loving life, doing their thing, and they go from 0 to 100, bam, within 5 seconds. And all of a sudden they're fine, and all of a sudden a meltdown, full on, full-fledged meltdown. And we've all been there. We know what it's like. So like I say, those tantrums and those meltdowns, like they can just come out of anywhere. But once again, why they come out of anywhere is their stress, and their stress response within their nervous system isn't adapting. And that trigger just gets lit like that, and bam, there it goes. So digging down to like the science level of this, which kind of gets a little bit nerdy, we talk about stress, like I say, all the time in my office, and there's 3 means of it. We have physical, we have emotional, and we have chemical, which is pretty much diet. It's like physical stresses. Kids are going to be falling off bikes. They're going to be running into stuff. They're going to be rambunctious. They might be involved into some really contact sports. So you're going to have those physical stresses that kids go through. But once again, it's a stress. Think about that snowball. That snowball's starting to go down the hill. We have emotional stress, and this is another one in our day and age with social media, with bullying, with fitting in, with the fast-paced lifestyle that we're in. This causes, like, it takes a pretty good toll on our kids' emotional, mental status. So there's another stress. Social media, fitting in, getting all your schoolwork done, doing the best that you can in all of your sports. All of those, once again, that snowball's going. And then we get to chemical stressors, which primarily kind of comes down to diet changes. And you'll hear people that have had to change some things within their kids' diet that have behavior issues. So, but if you aren't doing anything with your diet, those chemical stressors kind of start to filter in. And then all of a sudden you do have that huge snowball that we talked about. And all of those stresses have just now accumulated. And so the thing with that is that if we don't learn how to adapt, and we keep on to that constant threat mode, that constant, we're going to get into like a fight or flight mode that we're going to talk about, they endure that all day long. Every day they wake up, they endure those stresses. They go to bed, they might not be able to sleep real well. There's another stress. And they get back up, and that stress is there again. They endure this all day long, day in, day out. I should also put on a side note, I know we're talking about kids and meltdowns. Think about that for yourself for a second as an adult. Think about that. The amount of stress that we go through every day, and it's just there constantly, and it comes back up, and your nervous system just literally cannot keep up with it anymore. It becomes completely overwhelmed. And from there on, all of those little stresses, no matter if they're so small, almost the brain picks up on it and takes it as a threat. And then therefore we kind of get locked into this fight or flight stress response mode. And that's how we are now perceiving our environment, or even not perceiving our environment. We don't necessarily anymore, because we always might be feeling things as a threat. And even though it's not like a huge threat, like a bear chasing after you, it's enough little threats and enough little stresses that make it feel that way. And at that point, once we've gotten to that point, we can no longer balance. We can't think logically. There's no calm within our body to react in a nice and efficient, calming manner. It's going to be this, like I say, a huge outburst, this huge meltdown, this huge tantrum. And like I say, anywhere from our young kiddos all the way up to our teenagers. Even adults sometimes. Don't think that we're not escaping all of this. And so with, oh, I am so sorry. My dogs were triggered there for a moment. So with these triggered, Charlie, please go outside. No. See, stress right there. That's another stress. So these triggered behaviors, we're going to see those, like I say, all the way from our 2 to 3 year olds all the way up into our teens. They just have a completely overwhelmed nervous system with a lot of noise going on within it. So like if we have so much noise going on within the inside of us and our nervous system, and which I said before, our nervous system controls and coordinates every single function in your body. So from your 5 senses, to how you swallow, to how your stomach digests its food, to how your intestines take that and do everything that it needs to do with it, to how your heart pumps, how your lungs breathe. Your nervous system controls all of that. So think about all of those stressful times and maybe how those all those other systems might have been impacted. A lot of times with kids that are super stressed, their digestive tract is off. They're going to have issues with constipation a lot, and bladder function as well. They're going to develop even like you know, constant colds that can maybe then, and colds and like illnesses that lead into like the asthmas and stuff like that, because these kids' nervous systems are so stressed, overtaxed, and just on the go all the time. And so if there's lots of noise and overwhelm, we can't balance. There's no way our body's able to balance that. So that's where chiropractic comes in. And this is where it's a beautiful thing, and how chiropractic can influence that nervous system and bring that balance back within it. And so, I'm not for sure where I have my notes at. Anyway, okay, so sorry about that. So with chiropractic, and we've talked about this stress response and this constant fight or flight mode, or this constant stress mode, that's our sympathetic nervous system. It's that stress, that flight. And it's like if we have our sympathetic nervous system and we have our parasympathetic nervous system, you can Google this stuff too. Our parasympathetic nervous system is our nervous system that brings us back down to calm, because we weren't made to stay in this constant fight or fight, constant stress mode. And once that stress gets locked on, that's where as chiropractors, we're able to come in there and influence this other side of the nervous system, the parasympathetic, which is in charge of resting, digesting, healing, growing, developing. What of all those sounds good for a child? Every single one of them. Rest, digest, heal, grow, and develop. It's going to help them so much to get that parasympathetic nervous system more in control and more kicked on, and the sympathetic kicked off. Because only one can be on at the same time, and if stress is locked on, that kiddo's body's just not adapting to how it should, and that's where the nervous system just gets locked in. And that's where these tantrums happen, because on the inside there's so much noise, and the only way for them to get it out is for them to react into a tantrum and a meltdown. That's kind of what's going on the inside. And that's where chiropractic is hugely important in working with the nervous system and getting that system calmed back down. We want to create calm within their nervous system and not any more noise. They don't need any more noise. Let's bring that down. And so like whenever we talk about, you know, like how behavior therapists, they can do all these things on the external, and like, but they didn't have the resources to do anything, you know, looking to the internal. As chiropractors, and in my office, I am trained with amazing technology that looks to how your nervous system is functioning. It lets me know what kind of stress response are they in. Are they more in sympathetic tone, or are they more in parasympathetic tone? That lets me know where we're at. That lets me know how stressed and taxed this child or this adult or this teenager's body is in. And then within parts of our spine, more of that parasympathetic nerve fibers are in different parts of your spine. So we look to turn those on and to shut the ones off in that sympathetic, to bring it back down, to calm it back down. And so like that's the awesome thing as a chiropractor, and the amazing benefit that I get to have is with working with the nervous system and producing that for kiddos, for teenagers, for adults, for everybody. Because once we are more calm, we are able just to adapt to stresses more often. You'll be able to notice like things might not trigger your kid as much, or like, you know, a lot of their tantrums start to go the way because they have more calm within their body. Same thing with adults, same thing with the teens. It's really neat to see. So if you have any questions for me, and I hope this has just brought some light to you guys, and like, okay, like the therapy wasn't working. Therapy's great. The medications weren't quite working, you know, and all of these things just weren't quite working, and you want to get your kiddo to that next level. I encourage you, and like I say, you can do whatever you want, but I encourage you just to kind of even get your kiddo scanned. If there's anything I can do to help, please reach out to me. I love helping you guys. You can reach me at sjlwellness@gmail.com, or my phone number is 402-432-7702. Have a great day, and we'll be with you guys next time.